I discovered my husband with 17 nuns at an underground party in the convent. None of them were praying, believe me. And what I saw that night changed my life forever. Good afternoon, my dears. My name is Magdalene Fields, and I'm 81 years old. I was born in 1943 in a tiny town in rural Kentucky that barely showed up on maps. If you're watching this video, it's because you want to hear a true story, a story of pain and betrayal, but also of triumph. Before I begin, if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, I'd be very grateful. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This modern smartphone shows me everything, you know. I'm curious to know who's listening to the stories of this old lady. It was 1968, and I was 26 years old. America was in turmoil with Vietnam protests and civil rights marches. But in our little town, life kept its normal pace. I had been married to Theodore for 9 years. We already had 3 children, August, 8 years old, Marianne, 6, and little Peter, just 4. Theodore worked as a manager at the largest furniture store in the region. He was respected, went to church every Sunday, was always well-dressed, a handsome man, you know, the kind that made young women look when he passed by on the street, and I felt proud to be his wife. Our life wasn't wealthy, but we lived well. We had our little house and had managed to buy a used car, something rare back then for a simple family. I took care of the house and children and sewed for extra income to help with expenses. My mother-in-law, Eunice, lived with us and helped with the kids when I had lots of sewing orders. That day, I'll never forget, it was a Tuesday in April. I was washing Theodore's clothes. Back then, we didn't have these modern washing machines. Everything was done by hand in the wash basin. When I emptied the pockets of his suit jacket before washing, I found a small folded note, perfumed with a sweet lavender scent. Normally, I wouldn't have opened it. I always respected his space, but that perfume, I'd never smelled that perfume on his clothes before. With my heart already tightening, I unfolded the paper. I'll be waiting Thursday at the usual place. With love, Sister Benedict. My world collapsed in that instant. A nun. My husband was having an affair with a woman consecrated to God. My legs went weak. I had to sit on the wash stool. I remember staring at that note for so long that the letters started to blur before my eyes. 1,000 questions raced through my mind. Who was this Sister Benedict? What did the usual place mean? How long had this been going on? How could a man who went to church every Sunday, who taught his children to pray, do something like this? I didn't tell anyone that day. I tucked the note in my apron pocket and continued washing clothes, cooking, caring for the children as if nothing had happened. But inside, I was shattered. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lying next to him, hearing his peaceful breathing as he slept, I felt like I was beside a stranger. By Wednesday, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. After taking the children to school, I went straight to my friend Clara's house. She was a widow and had been my friend since childhood. If there was anyone I could trust, it was her. I showed her the note, crying so hard I could barely speak. She read it, reread it, and then looked at me with a mixture of anger and compassion. A nun. Theodore is involved with a nun. This is an abomination, she exclaimed indignantly. She was a religious woman, devout. To her, this was worse than any other kind of betrayal. What do I do, Clara? How do I confront him? What if it's just a misunderstanding? I asked, desperately wanting to believe there was some innocent explanation. Misunderstanding, Magdalene? Open your eyes. With love, the usual place. This isn't a first meeting, honey. This has been going on for some time. She was right, of course. I started to remember little signs I had ignored. The Thursday night meetings that had begun a few months ago. Money mysteriously disappearing from our savings. The times he came home late smelling of perfume, saying he'd visited a client who wore a lot of perfume. Let's go now, Clara said suddenly. Where? To the convent. Let's find out who this Sister Benedict is. St. Joseph's Convent was located on the outskirts of town. It was an old, imposing stone building surrounded by a large garden. The Sisters of the Order of St. Clare had lived there for more than 80 years. They were respected in the community, ran an orphanage, and taught catechism to children. But how would we get in? It wasn't like we could just knock on the door and ask for Sister Benedict, saying we wanted to confront her about an affair with my husband. That's when Clara had the idea that would change everything. "My sister Teresa," she said with a gleam in her eyes. "She was a nun for 10 years, remember? She left the convent when she met Joseph and fell in love. She must still have her habit stored away somewhere." "What are you suggesting, Clara?" I asked, already guessing where she was going. "You dress up as a nun and enter the convent. Say you're visiting, that you're from another order, another town. That way, you can look for this Benedict woman and discover the truth." The idea seemed crazy, but I was desperate. Besides, something inside me wanted to see with my own eyes. I needed concrete proof before confronting Theodore. That same afternoon, we went to Teresa's house. When Clara explained the situation, she was horrified but decided to help us. She went to the attic and returned with a wooden box. Inside, carefully folded, was the black and white habit she had worn for so many years. "It's a bit yellowed from time, but it should still fit." "You and I are the same size," Teresa said, handing me the habit. "But Magdalene, think carefully. This is dangerous. If they discover you, if they discover me, what will they do? Excommunicate me?" I replied with a bitterness I had never felt before. "I'm already in hell anyway, Teresa." We decided that I would go on Thursday, the day mentioned in the note. Clara would accompany me to the convent, but would wait outside. The plan was simple. I would enter, ask for Sister Benedict, saying I had a donation to make, and find out who she was. Maybe I would even confront her, depending on the situation. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I had to invent an excuse for my mother-in-law to stay with the children all afternoon. I said I was helping with the church bazaar. Theodore left for work on Thursday morning as usual. He kissed me on the forehead, as always. He told me he loved me as always. I watched his every movement, looking for signs, some nervousness, some indication of what was to come. But he acted normally. "I have a meeting again tonight," he commented casually during breakfast. "Don't wait up for dinner." I just nodded, feeling the bitter taste of his lie. A meeting. That's what he called his encounters with the nun. In the afternoon, I went to Clara's house. Teresa was there to help me wear the habit correctly. It was more complicated than it seemed. There were several layers, cords. The veil had to be fastened in a specific way. When they finished, they led me to the mirror. The reflected image startled me. It didn't look like me. It really looked like a nun, with that serious face framed by the black and white fabric. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt for impersonating a religious woman. But then I remembered the note, the "With love, Sister Benedict," and the guilt gave way to determination. "Remember," said Teresa, adjusting the veil one last time, "keep your head down, speak little. And if anyone asks, you're from the Order of St. Francis from Louisville. You're just passing through to visit a sick cousin in town." The drive to the convent was silent. Clara drove her blue Volkswagen Beetle, and I looked out the window, feeling the rough fabric of the habit against my skin, my heart beating so hard I thought I would faint. "I'll wait here," Clara said when we arrived. "If you don't come back in an hour, I'll come after you." "And how will you get in?" I asked. "I'll find a way," she replied with that determination I always admired in her. "Go with God, Magdalene, and may He give you strength for what you're about to find." I got out of the car, feeling my legs tremble beneath the heavy habit. I walked slowly to the large iron gate of the convent. I took 3 deep breaths, as my mother taught me when I was nervous, and rang the bell. A young novice answered. She must have been about 18, with an angelic face, innocent eyes. I did my best imitation of a nun, keeping my head slightly bowed. "Good afternoon, sister. I am Sister Mary," I improvised. "From the Order of St. Francis, from Louisville. I'm passing through town and would like to speak with Sister Benedict about a donation for the orphanage." The novice looked at me with a slightly confused expression. "Sister Benedict?" "Ah, yes. She's busy with preparations for tomorrow's celebration." In the storage area at the back. My heart raced. So she did exist. She wasn't an invention, a nightmare. There really was a Sister Benedict in this convent. Could you take me to her? The donation is urgent, I insisted. The novice hesitated for a moment, but then nodded and led me through the large inner courtyard of the convent. We crossed a well-kept garden, passed through a long, dark corridor that smelled of wax and incense. Other nuns passed us, greeting with discreet nods of the head. I responded the same way, praying that no one would question me. Finally, we arrived at a separate building at the back of the convent, an old barn that now served as a storage area, according to the novice. Sister Benedict is in there preparing materials for the celebration, she said. Can I help with anything else? No, thank you. I'll speak directly with her, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The novice made a small reverence and walked away, leaving me alone before the large wooden door. That's when I noticed. There were sounds coming from inside, not the sounds of someone working, arranging things. It was soft music and laughter. In a convent. My stomach tightened. Something was very wrong. Slowly, with my heart almost coming out of my mouth, I pushed the heavy wooden door. What I saw when I opened that door haunts me to this day. Even after so many years, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with the image etched in my memory, as vivid as on that Thursday in April 1968. I pushed the door slowly, my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my temples. The first thing that hit me was the music. It wasn't sacred music. It was La Bamba, that same song Theodore said was sinner's music when I wanted to dance at home. The second thing was the smell. Wine, perfume, and something else. An aroma of the forbidden, of secrecy. When my eyes adjusted to the dim light, the scene I saw seemed to come from a nightmare. There was my husband, Theodore, sitting in a chair in the center of the room, a guitar in his lap, playing animatedly, and around him, my God in heaven, there were nuns. Many nuns. I counted later. There were 17. Some still wore the complete habit. Others wore only parts of it, hair showing, faces flushed. There was a long table covered with wine bottles, fruits, even a cake. 2 nuns were dancing together in a dark corner. 3 were sitting on the floor around Theodore, looking at him as if he were a divinity. And behind him, massaging his shoulders, leaning in to whisper something in his ear, was a tall, beautiful woman, about 30, whom I instantly knew to be the famous Sister Benedict. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, speak, or even breathe properly. It was as if I had been transported to another world, a world where everything I knew and believed in had been turned upside down. It was at that moment that Theodore saw me. Our eyes met. He didn't recognize me immediately in that habit, with the veil covering part of my face. He smiled, thinking I was another guest for his party. It was that carefree smile, that smile of a man who felt secure in his sin, that awakened something in me. In a sudden movement, I tore the veil from my head. My hair fell around my shoulders. Theodore's smile froze, then disappeared completely. His face went from rosy to white, then to a greenish tone, as if he were about to vomit right there. "Theodore!" I screamed with all the strength in my lungs. What happened next was pure chaos. The music stopped abruptly when the guitar slipped from his hands and fell to the floor with a dissonant sound. A plump nun shouted, "Jesus!" and fainted on the spot, falling like a sack of potatoes. Another dropped the wine bottle she was holding, staining her white habit red. It looked like blood flowing over sanctity. 2 younger nuns, they must have been about 20, jumped out the side window that faced the garden. Literally jumped, habit and all. A novice hid under the table, like a child caught misbehaving. Another tried to stand still in a corner, pretending to be a statue of a saint. The most impressive was the Mother Superior. Yes, the Mother Superior herself was there. That lady of about 60, who was feared and respected throughout the town, sitting in an old armchair with a goblet of wine in her hand. When she saw me, she jumped up, raised her hands to the sky, and began to recite in Latin, as if they were in the middle of a prayer when I entered. "Dominus vobiscum," she shouted, while grabbing a Bible from a corner and opening it haphazardly. I walked slowly across the room among the terrified nuns who parted like the Red Sea. I went straight to Theodore, who was trying to get up but tripped over a nun who was on all fours, picking up fallen grapes. The two rolled in a tangle of legs, arms, and black and white fabric. When he finally managed to stand up, he straightened his shirt, trying to look dignified, as if it were possible to maintain any dignity in that situation. "Magdalene, I can explain," he began with that voice he used to convince customers in the furniture store. "Explain what, Theodore?" I cut him off. "The 17 nuns, the wine, or the wedding ring that's not on your finger?" Only then did I notice that he had removed his wedding ring. The so-called Sister Benedict approached. She was really beautiful, with a face that would be serene in other circumstances, but at that moment showed pure terror. "You must be the wife," she said, as if we were being introduced at a garden party. "Theodore talks about you a lot." That was the last straw. I couldn't contain myself and slapped her face. The sound echoed through the room like a whip. Then I turned to Theodore and slapped him too. "That's for my money you spent here." I gave him another. "That's for our children." And another. "And this is for making a fool of me all these months." Tears were streaming down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were of anger, of indignation. Something inside me had broken forever. The naive, submissive Magdalene, who accepted everything with a smile, had died in that barn converted into a party room. The nuns who were still in the room, those who hadn't fled or fainted, stood paralyzed, watching the scene. Some were crying too. The Mother Superior had mysteriously disappeared. Theodore was holding his face, red from the slaps, without saying a word. That's when I heard heavy footsteps coming from the corridor. The door opened forcefully. It was Father Anselm, the parish vicar, a man in his 50s, known for his severe temperament. Behind him, the novice who had received me at the entrance, with wide, frightened eyes. "What's going on here?" he thundered with his Sunday sermon voice. But then he saw the whole scene, the wine bottles, the disheveled nuns, Theodore with the mark of my fingers on his face, me dressed as a nun, but clearly not being one. The priest paled. "Holy Mother of God," he murmured, making the sign of the cross. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I had seen enough. My life would never be the same again. I knew that. I left that place without looking back, tearing off the rest of that habit as I walked. At the gate, I found Clara, who was anxiously waiting for me. "Magdalene, what happened? You're white as paper." I fell into her arms, finally letting all the emotion out. "He was with 17 nuns, Clara. 17. She didn't believe it at first. She thought I was exaggerating, that maybe I had seen Theodore with 1 or 2 nuns. But when I described the scene in detail, she was horrified. "My God, Magdalene, this is the end of the world. It's the apocalypse." For the small religious town where we lived, it was almost that indeed. Clara took me to her house. I couldn't go back to mine in that state. She prepared a tea with a few drops of brandy and made me lie down for a bit. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scenes in my head. The more I thought, the more details came to light. The musical instruments hidden in a corner, indicating it wasn't the first time. The familiarity with which the nuns treated Theodore, without any initial embarrassment, the way some looked at him with obvious desire. I realized that this wasn't just a love affair between my husband and a nun. It was something much bigger, much more complex. It was a network of secrets, of meetings, of broken vows, both his to me and theirs to God. Around 7 in the evening, I decided I needed to go home. My children would be waiting, worried. Besides, I had to face reality at some point. "Are you sure?" asked Clara. "You can stay here tonight. I'll send a message to your mother-in-law, saying you're helping with the bazaar until late." "No," I replied firmly. "I need to go back. I need to look Eunice in the eyes, see if she knew. I need to be with my children. Clara lent me a dress, since mine was all crumpled under the habit I had worn. I combed my hair, washed my face. In the mirror, I saw a different woman, the same eyes, the same face, but something had changed profoundly. The night was warm, humid, typical of April in that region. The cicadas were singing on the posts. Some people greeted me on the street, not knowing that my world had just collapsed. To them, I was still the same Magdalene as always, wife of the respectable furniture store manager. When I opened the door of my house, the house I had shared with Theodore for almost a decade, I found my mother-in-law, Eunice, sitting at the kitchen table, having her evening coffee as if it were an ordinary day. She looked at me, at Clara's borrowed dress, at my still disheveled hair, and sighed. "You found out?" she said simply. It wasn't a question. I stood frozen at the kitchen door. Her words confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. She knew. My own mother-in-law, who lived under my roof, who ate the food I prepared, who watched my children grow up, knew that her son was cheating on me in the most humiliating way possible. I threw myself into a chair, physically and emotionally exhausted. "You knew?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She nodded, without looking me in the eye. "I've been washing the convent's laundry for 15 years, Magdalene. I started to see strange stains on the habits, lipstick, wine. I even found a note once." The anger returned with full force, but now directed at her as well. "And you didn't tell me anything?" "He's my son," she replied simply, as if that explained everything. "And at least he doesn't have another family out there. Just fun." "Fun?" I wanted to throw the kettle at her, tear out that gray hair. How could she call that fun? It was betrayal. It was sin. It was the destruction of my family. But then I heard a noise coming from the door. My oldest son, August, was standing there in his blue pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Mom, where were you? Grandma said you were at the bazaar, but isn't the bazaar only on Sunday?" That innocent question brought me back to reality. My children, what would happen to them when this scandal exploded in town? How would they be treated at school, at church, in the places they frequented? "I had to help organize some things, son," I lied, trying to smile. "Go to bed, it's late. We'll talk tomorrow." When he left, I faced my mother-in-law with all the determination I could muster. "You're leaving tomorrow. You can go live with your blessed son." "And the children, who will take care of them while you work?" she asked, knowing I depended on her for this, since I sewed at home to help with expenses. "I'll manage," I replied dryly. "I've always managed, and now, more than ever, I'll manage on my own." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the back porch, looking at the stars, smoking a cigarette, something I hadn't done since before I got married. I thought about what would happen next, how I would tell my children, how I would face the looks on the street the next day. I was sure the story was already spreading through the small town, where nothing remained secret for long. Around 3 a.m, I heard a noise at the front gate. I got up cautiously and peeked through the living room window. It was Theodore staggering, visibly drunk. He was trying to put the key in the lock, but couldn't hit the hole. I opened the window and shouted, "Go away! Don't set foot in this house again!" He looked up, surprised. Then his face contorted into an expression of supplication. "Magdalene, please," he begged in a pasty voice. "It was the devil who tempted me. Those women are the devil in skirts." "The devil in skirts and a crucifix, huh?" I replied bitterly. "Get out of here before I call the police, or better yet, before I call the bishop." He stood there crying at the gate for almost an hour, alternating between flimsy excuses and accusations against the nuns. He said they seduced him, that they wanted to experience sin before fully surrendering to God, that he was just a weak man, unable to resist temptation. Not once did he take responsibility. Not once did he truly ask for forgiveness. Finally, when the neighbor threatened to call the police because of the noise, he left, dragging his feet on the sidewalk, the pathetic silhouette of a man destroyed by his own choices. The sun was beginning to rise when I finally went inside to try to get some sleep. But before closing my eyes, I made a decision. Theodore had ended my life as I knew it, but I wouldn't let him end me. Somehow, I would find the strength to start over, for myself and for my children. As I expected, the news spread through town like wildfire. The morning after the discovery, I went out to buy bread at Joachim's bakery, as I did every morning. As soon as I entered, the conversation ceased. 6 pairs of eyes turned to me. The baker, 2 elderly ladies who always gossiped at the counter, a man I didn't recognize, and a young couple. They all looked at me as if I had 2 heads. "Good morning," I said, pretending normality. "I'd like 2 loaves of French bread and a sweet roll, please." The baker, Mrs. Louise, served me in silence, avoiding my gaze. When she handed me the bag, she held my hand for a moment. "Strength, Magdalene," she whispered. "Men are all the same." That's when I realized they already knew, all of them. The story was already running through town, probably with exaggerated, distorted details, but the essence was there. Theodore, the nuns, the discovery. As I left the bakery, I noticed whispers behind me. Instead of going home, I decided to stop by the farmer's market to buy vegetables for lunch. At each stand I stopped. The same thing. Looks, whispers, sometimes a word of support, other times an awkward silence. At Mrs. Carmen's stand, the vendor I had known since I was a girl, I clearly heard when she said to another customer, "Poor Magdalene, lost her husband to an entire convent. They say there were more than 20 nuns." I felt the blood rush to my face. There were 17, not 20, as if the exact number mattered. But the worst wasn't the inaccuracy, it was the public humiliation. I, Magdalene Fields, who had always been an exemplary wife, a dedicated mother, a practicing Catholic, was now an object of pity and gossip. I returned home with the groceries, feeling as if I were carrying not just the bags, but the weight of all those looks. My mother-in-law was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the children. For the first time in my life, she seemed uncomfortable in my presence. "Have the children eaten?" I asked, ignoring the elephant in the room. "Yes, they've already gone to school. August didn't want to go, said he had a stomachache, but I insisted." Something in her tone alerted me. "Why didn't he want to go, Eunice?" She looked away, pretending to arrange the dish towels. I think some children said things. You know how children are." My heart tightened. I hadn't thought of that. My children. How would they be treated at school? What would they hear about their father? About me? I didn't have to wait long for the answer. At lunchtime, when the children returned from school, little Peter, only 4 years old, ran to me crying. Mary Ann, my 6-year-old girl, came in right behind him, also with tears in her eyes. Only August, the oldest, kept his face closed, an expression of contained anger. "What happened?" I asked, bending down to hug the little ones. "The kids are saying mean things about Daddy and Mommy," sobbed Mary Ann. "They say he dates nuns, that he's going to hell." Peter, who didn't even really understand what was happening, was just crying because his sister was crying. But August was looking at me as if waiting for an explanation. "Is it true, Mom?" he asked with a seriousness that didn't match his 8 years. Did Dad do bad things with the nuns? How do you explain something like that to a child? How do you say that, yes, their father, the man they admired, had betrayed not only me, but the very faith we tried to instill in them? I opted for the truth, but a softened version. "Your father made wrong choices, August. Choices that hurt our family, but that doesn't change the fact that he loves you." "Then why isn't he here?" asked my son with that flawless child's logic. "Because sometimes, when adults do very wrong things, they need time to think about what they've done," I replied, knowing it was an insufficient explanation. The questions continued during lunch. Where was their father? When would he return? Why were people talking about them at school? I tried to answer in the best way possible, protecting them without completely lying. It was a thin and painful line to tread. After lunch, when they returned to school, August stayed behind for a moment. He hugged me tight, in a way he hadn't done in a long time, since he decided he was too big for Mom's hugs. "I hit Jimmy today," he confessed. "He said Dad was a nun chaser. I hit him, and now the teacher wants to talk to you." My heart broke a little more. Not only would I have to deal with my own humiliation, but also with the suffering of my children, innocent victims in this whole story. In the afternoon, I went to school to speak with August's teacher. Mrs. Cecilia was an understanding woman, thank God. She explained that she had talked to the class about respect, and that she would not tolerate any more comments about our family. But her pitying eyes told me what her words didn't dare. This wouldn't end so soon. "Magdalene," she said as I was leaving, "if you need anything, time to reorganize your life, I can give private lessons to the boys for a few weeks, at no charge." The offer, though kind, was another reminder of my new reality. I was now the abandoned woman, the pitiful one, an object of charity. I thanked her politely but refused. My children needed normalcy, routine, as difficult as it might be. When I returned home, I found Clara waiting for me. She had brought a cornbread, my favorite, and news. "The scandal at the convent is huge," she told as we prepared coffee. "The bishop came from Chicago. They say 7 nuns were expelled from the order, including that Benedict woman. The Mother Superior was transferred to a convent in rural Nebraska, practically exile, and Father Anselm might lose the parish for not noticing what was happening under his nose. I felt no satisfaction with that news, just weariness. What difference did it make to me if the nuns were punished? My life was still in pieces. "And Theodore?" I asked without really wanting to know. "He's staying at Mrs. Azira's boarding house on the way out of town. They say he's been drinking since yesterday, that he didn't even go to work." That didn't surprise me either. Theodore had always been weak in facing consequences. He preferred to hide, run away, blame others. The following days were a test of my resilience. Each time I left the house was an ordeal. At Sunday church, the new priest, hastily sent to replace Father Anselm, preached about temptation and forgiveness, looking directly at me several times. The women sat far away, as if my misfortune was contagious. The men looked at me differently, some with pity, others with a newly discovered interest, as if the fact of being alone made me available. The children continued to suffer at school. Peter started wetting the bed, something he hadn't done since he was 3. Mary Ann became quiet, withdrawn, and August, my oldest son, transformed into the man of the house overnight, taking on responsibilities that weren't his, protecting his siblings, helping me at home, too mature for his age. 1 month after the discovery, I was sewing in the living room when I heard a knock at the door. It was almost night. The children had already had dinner and were playing in the backyard. Eunice had moved to her sister's house, as I had demanded, although she came daily to help with the children while I worked. I opened the door, and there he was, Theodore, thinner, unshaven, with deep circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes, a shadow of the elegant and charming man he had been. "May I come in?" he asked in a hoarse voice. I hesitated, but eventually allowed it, not for him, but for the children. Maybe they needed to see their father as much as the idea displeased me. He sat on the sofa, looking around as if seeing the house for the first time. His eyes stopped at the photographs on the bookshelf. Our wedding, the children when they were little, happy moments that now seemed to belong to other people. "Magdalene," he began with a trembling voice, "I've come to ask for forgiveness. I'm sorry, it was madness, a weakness." I remained silent, waiting. I knew more would come. That woman, Benedict, she bewitched me. I'm sure she used some potion, some spell. "It's the devil's work, Magdalene." There it was, the flimsy excuse, the shifting of blame. It was never his responsibility, always someone else's, always the women's. They sought me out, you know. The nuns. It started when I delivered some furniture to the convent for the mother's room. Benedict came to talk to me, asked questions about my life, said she missed the outside world, that sometimes she regretted entering the convent so young. He continued talking, detailing how it all started, how she suggested he bring a guitar to play for the sisters on Thursday, the day when the Mother Superior went to visit the orphanage. How one thing led to another. How more nuns joined the secret meetings. How what started as a musical afternoon transformed into parties with wine and behaviors he didn't have the courage to detail. They were trapped in that life, you understand? They wanted a little freedom, a taste of the world they had left behind. And I'm just a weak man, Magdalene. I listened to everything in silence. When he finished, only one question came from my lips. And our money, Theodore? The money for the boys' school, for the house renovation? Where is it? He lowered his eyes, unable to look at me. I spent it on the parties, on gifts. Benedict liked French perfumes. It was like a punch to the stomach. Not only the betrayal, the public humiliation, he had compromised the future of our children. He had thrown away years of savings to impress a nun with expensive perfumes. I want you to leave, I said, standing up. Now, Magdalene, please, he begged, falling to his knees. A pathetic scene. Give me another chance, for the children's sake, for everything we've lived together. You destroyed all that, Theodore. It wasn't me. It wasn't the nuns, as much as you want to blame them. It was you and your choices. I'll change, I swear. I'll be a better man, a better father, a husband. You are no longer my husband, I cut off firmly. And as for being a better father, you'll have to prove that with time and actions, not with empty promises. While we were arguing, we didn't notice that August had entered the room. We only noticed his presence when he spoke, his voice small but determined. Go away, Dad. Mom is asking you to. Theodore looked at his son, then at me, then back at his son. Shame finally seemed to hit him with full force. Son, You made Mom cry, continued August. You like the nuns more than us. Jimmy said you're going to hell. Is that true, Dad? The simple, direct words of a child have a power that no adult speech possesses. Theodore stood up, defeated not by my arguments, but by the judgment of his own son. I'll come back another day, he murmured, walking to the door, when you're calmer. As soon as the door closed behind him, August ran into my arms and finally cried. Not the contained crying of the previous days, but deep sobs from a child who had lost something precious, the idealized image of his father. That night, after I finally put all 3 children to bed, I went to Theodore's office, a room he always kept locked. Men's business, he would say, as if finances and business were incomprehensible to my female brain. With a hammer from the toolbox, I broke the lock. I needed to know exactly what we had or what we no longer had. What I found was worse than I had imagined. In a drawer, dozens of receipts for expensive gifts, perfumes, jewelry, even a gold ring with a small sapphire that cost 3 months of our salary. All with nuns' names on the notes. For Benedict, with affection. For Sister Cecilia, a special memento. Our savings book, empty, 5 years of savings, money for the boys' college, for the house renovation, for emergencies, all gone. But the worst was hidden in a false bottom of the desk drawer, a black notebook, like a ledger. When I opened it, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was a complete accounting of the parties. Theodore noted down everything, how much each nun contributed, expenses for drink, food, even special gifts. The nuns, bored in that convent life, many from rich families with access to money, paid to have a few hours of worldly fun. Each contributed what she could. Sister Benedict, who came from an important family in the capital, was the one who paid the most. In the middle of those notes, I found a thick envelope hidden in the lining of the drawer. I counted. There were almost $2,000. It was the profit from the recent parties that he hadn't spent yet. I sat on the office floor, stunned by the discovery. It wasn't just an affair, a passionate betrayal. It was a scheme, a business. My husband was literally profiting from clandestine parties for bored nuns. It was at that moment, alone in that office, with the evidence of betrayal and lies in my hands, that I made the decision that would change my life forever. That black notebook in my hands wasn't just proof of Theodore's betrayal. It was my salvation. There were not only details of the parties, but also a list of names, the nuns' families, addresses, personal information, rich, influential families who would give everything to keep their daughters, sisters, and nieces away from even bigger scandals. The next morning, with the children at school, I put on my best dress, a discreet navy blue one that I wore for special occasions, and went to the bank. I deposited the $2,000 I found in Theodore's office. Dirty money, stained with sin, but by divine justice, it would come back to support my children. Then I headed for the only law office in town. Dr. Mendez, a serious man in his 50s, was known for his discretion. When I entered his office, he seemed uncomfortable. Of course, the whole town was commenting on the case of the nuns, as it was already being called. "Mrs. Fields, how can I help you?" he asked formally. I placed the notebook on the table, open to a specific page. His eyes widened when he saw the name of his daughter, Mary Augusta, now known as Sister Cecilia, one of the novices at the convent. "I want a divorce," I said decisively, "and I want you to be my lawyer." The man paled, flipping through the pages of the notebook with trembling fingers. This is very serious, Mrs. Fields." "Yes, it is. And imagine when the judge reads all these details in the proceedings, when the newspapers publish it, when the entire town knows exactly what the preferences of each nun were." He understood immediately. "What do you propose?" "You will go to Theodore today. He signs the divorce papers, giving me full custody of the children, the house, and a generous alimony. In exchange, I promise that this information will never become public. In fact, not even the other nuns will know that she was the one who organized everything. It wasn't blackmail. It was negotiation. It was survival. It was justice." Dr. Mendez adjusted himself in his chair, regaining his composure. "Mrs. Fields, do you know that divorce is something very serious? The church doesn't recognize it." "The church," I cut him off, "lost the right to tell me what to do when it allowed 17 of its brides of Christ to party with my husband in a barn. Let's talk about laws, doctor, not religion." That same day, Dr. Mendez went to the boarding house where Theodore was staying. He returned in the evening with all the papers signed. Theodore not only agreed to everything, but also waived any right to the property and accepted paying half his salary as alimony, the fastest divorce in the history of that town. But that was just the beginning. On Sunday morning, I dressed myself with care. I wore a simple but elegant black dress. I put on a discreet hat and gloves. I dressed my 3 children in their best clothes. We entered the church with our heads held high, ignoring the looks and whispers. We sat in the first pew, something we never did. The message was clear. I'm not ashamed. I don't hide. After communion, the new priest, Father Joseph, announced the week's contributions for the church renovation. That's when I stood up and walked to the altar. "Father," I said loudly for everyone to hear, "I would like to make a special donation for the renovation of St. Joseph's Convent." A murmur ran through the church. I handed over an envelope with part of the party money, not all of it. I needed the rest for my plan. The priest, who already knew everything, turned red, but accepted it. "And I would like to announce that I will be providing the buffet for free for Our Lady's feast next month. It's the least I can do for our community in this difficult time." I left the church with my head held high, feeling the looks on my back. That moment was crucial. I was no longer the poor, betrayed woman, the abandoned wife. I was the martyr, the saint, the strong woman who forgave the church for the sins committed against her. On Monday, with the children at school, I went to visit Clara. I showed her the notebook, explained what I had discovered about Theodore's business. "I need your help," I said. "I want to start a business." Clara's eyes widened. "A business? You? But Magdalene, the children, the house? Precisely because of that, I need to support my children, give them a future. I can't depend on Theodore's alimony forever. Who guarantees he'll pay regularly?" I explained my idea, a catering service for parties and events. With the money I had saved and what was left from the party's fund, I could rent a small space near the square, buy basic equipment, and start. But you've never run a business, Magdalene, argued Clara, always practical. I've managed a house with 3 children, a meddling mother-in-law, and an unfaithful husband for years, I replied. Believe me, a catering business will be a breeze in comparison. What I didn't immediately tell Clara was the second part of my plan, the one that involved the names in the black notebook. The next morning, I took a bus to Chicago. 4 hours of travel, sitting alone, planning each step. When I arrived, I went straight to the address listed in the notebook, the residence of the Albuquerque family, the parents of the famous Sister Benedict. It was a mansion in a wealthy neighborhood with an immaculate garden and an imposing dark wooden door. I took a deep breath and rang the bell. A uniformed maid answered, looking at me suspiciously. I asked to speak with Dr. Albuquerque, saying it was a matter related to his daughter, Benedict. In a few minutes, I was led to an elegant office where a gray-haired man in an expensive suit awaited me. "What do you want with my daughter?" he asked without preamble. "If you've come to cause problems—" "No, sir," I replied calmly. "I've come to offer a solution." I explained who I was, the wife of Theodore, the man from the convent parties. His eyes narrowed, but he let me continue. I told him about the notebook, the details it contained, how it could destroy not only his daughter's reputation, but that of the entire family if it became public. "You must be wondering why I called this meeting," I concluded, keeping my voice firm despite the nervousness. "Be direct, ma'am," he replied tensely. "How much do you want for your silence?" "I don't want money directly," I replied. "I want a fair loan to start my business, a catering service." He seemed surprised. "A loan?" "Yes, with low interest, of course. And in exchange, I guarantee that your daughter's name will never be publicly associated with the scandal. In fact, not even the other nuns will know that she was the one who organized everything." Dr. Albuquerque studied me for a long moment. "You're smarter than you look." "I had to become smart to survive, doctor. I have 3 children to raise." I left that meeting with a loan contract for $5,000, more than enough to start the catering business, together with the money I already had. I repeated the process with 2 other families, the parents of Sister Cecilia, Dr. Mendez's daughter, who was already predisposed to help, and Sister Margaret. I didn't ask for much, just enough to ensure my business started on the right foot. For the families, it was a relief that I didn't want to create a scandal. In less than a month, I rented a small hall near the central square, bought used equipment from a bakery that had closed in Memphis, and hired 2 helpers, women like me who needed to work to support their families. The name, St. Magdalene Catering, a reference to the saint who, like me, was also wronged and then redeemed herself. But only I knew that the name was a small revenge, a constant reminder to the town of the scandal everyone wanted to forget. The first event I organized was a christening, the pharmacist's son. It was small, simple, but everything turned out perfect. The food was delicious, the service impeccable. People were surprised by my talent for organization. The real turning point came when the diocese bishop, who had come from Chicago to resolve the convent situation, sought me out personally. I thought he was coming to reprimand me for causing the scandal, as if it were my fault. But to my surprise, he wanted to thank me. "You've done a service to the church," he said solemnly. "Those activities at the convent needed to be stopped." I realized that the bishop was more concerned with the church's reputation than with the nuns' morality. He offered me compensation for the trouble, actually a bribe disguised as charity, so that I wouldn't spread the story to widely circulated newspapers. "I don't need handouts," I replied firmly. "But if the church really wants to help, I have a proposal. I'm opening a catering service and would need a contract to provide food for the parish events." And I left with an exclusivity contract for all Catholic events in the region for the next 2 years. First communion parties, bazaars, even church weddings, everything would be served by my catering service. The irony didn't escape me. The same money that Theodore used to betray me, the same institution that harbored that betrayal, now financed my independence. In 3 months, my catering business was already a success. People came from neighboring towns to hire my services. I had to hire 2 more helpers. Meanwhile, Theodore was sinking. He lost his job at the furniture store. The owner, a religious man, no longer wanted to associate his establishment with the man from the nun scandal. He started drinking heavily. He moved to a neighboring town where he got a mediocre job as an insurance salesman. In the meantime, the ex-nuns who had been expelled from the order returned to their families. Many of them, coming from wealthy families, soon married or found jobs. And do you know who they hired to organize their wedding parties? Me. St. Magdalene Catering became a favorite among the ex-religious women who found there an environment without judgments. 6 months after the scandal, I received an unexpected visit at the catering service. It was late at night. I was doing the day's accounts when the door opened. It was Benedict, no longer Sister Benedict, just Benedict. She was different, hair loose, simple but elegant clothes, her face free from the veil that previously framed it. "May I come in?" she asked hesitantly. I indicated a chair. She sat down, nervous, fidgeting with her purse. "I've come to ask for forgiveness," she began, "for what I did to your family, your children." I remained silent, letting her speak. "I was unhappy at the convent, you know. I entered very young due to family pressure. I never had a vocation. When I met Theodore, he seemed so free, so full of life. It was weakness, selfishness." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I'm pregnant," she answered, the tears starting to fall. 3 months. It's Theodore's. The news should have destroyed me. But strangely, I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just a certainty that I had made the right decision in leaving him. "And what do you intend to do?" "My parents are sending me to a farm in the countryside. I'll have the baby there, away from society's eyes. Afterward, I don't know. Maybe I'll give it up for adoption." I looked at that woman, no longer the rival, the homewrecker, but just a scared, pregnant, lonely woman. Something in me moved. "Does Theodore know?" "Yes. He said he can't handle it, that he can barely pay child support for your children. Typical, always running from responsibilities." "Do you work?" I asked. She looked confused. "No, my parents. I need someone who understands organization, who knows how to deal with people. The catering business is growing. I can't handle it alone anymore." Her eyes widened. "Are you offering me a job? After everything?" "I'm not offering friendship. I'm offering a chance, the same one I'm giving myself. Besides," I added, "that child is half-sibling to my children. It deserves a chance, too." Benedict started working with me the following week. It was strange at first, the looks, the whispers, but soon people got used to it. We were 2 women trying to survive the wrong choices of the same man. 1 year after the scandal, my catering service was already the most requested, not only in town, but throughout the region. I hired 10 employees, all women who needed jobs, widows, divorcees, single mothers. I bought a larger property, built a real banquet hall. And Theodore? I heard he was sinking deeper and deeper. He had lost his job as an insurance salesman, lived off odd jobs, drank too much. The child support began to be late. That's when I decided to deliver the final blow. With the money I had saved, I bought the debt he had with a local loan shark, a debt he had contracted to impress a rich widow he was dating in the neighboring town. When he couldn't pay, I sent a message. Either he would come work for me at my catering service, or I would demand immediate payment, which would mean jail for him. A week later, Theodore appeared at the door of St. Magdalene Catering, head down, defeated. I gave him the most humble job, washing pans, cleaning the hall after parties. I also gave him a small room at the back of the property where he could live. "Why?" he asked, confused by my apparent kindness. "Because I want our children to see that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. And I want you to see every day the empire I built on the ruins you left." At wedding parties, when brides asked about the beautiful decorations, I made a point of calling Theodore. "This is our employee, my ex-husband. He's very talented with his hands, for cleaning, of course." He would lower his head in shame while I smiled, cruel perhaps, but as the saying goes, what goes around comes around. The true revenge wasn't taking everything from him. It was making him watch, day after day, as I succeeded. Seeing the women he once considered weak and dependent become strong and independent. Watching his own children grow up, graduate, build respectable families, all without his help or influence. The greatest victory. 5 years later, when I remarried a respectable widower, a merchant from the capital, I made sure Theodore served at the party. He spent the entire night carrying trays, filling glasses, always with his head down, while I danced happily in the arms of my new husband. That night, when everyone had gone, I found Theodore cleaning the hall. For the first time in years, we exchanged more than functional words. "You won, Magdalene," he said simply. "You completely destroyed me." "No, Theodore," I replied. "You destroyed yourself. I just built something new on the ruins." Today, looking back at 81 years old, I barely recognize that 26-year-old young woman who found a perfumed note in her husband's pocket. Life has these things. It breaks us to rebuild us stronger, wiser. St. Magdalene Catering grew beyond my most ambitious dreams. What began as a small business in a rented room transformed into the largest and most prestigious event center in the region. In the 1970s, when the economic boom reached Middle America, I took the opportunity to expand. I bought the property adjacent to the convent, irony of fate, which had been put up for sale when the nuns, after the scandal, had to reduce their activities. There I built the St. Magdalene Institute of Culinary Arts, where I began to train young women, especially single, widowed, and solo mothers without resources, to work in the food and events area. It was my way of giving back, of transforming my pain into something that helped other women find independence. In the 1980s, when my children were already grown, I decided to take another step. With the help of my second husband, Robert, a good, kind man, the opposite of Theodore, I secured a larger loan and built a hotel adjacent to the banquet hall. The St. Magdalene Inn, an elegant but welcoming place where wedding guests and event attendees could stay. My children grew up watching all this. August, my firstborn, graduated in business administration and today manages the financial part of the business. Mary Ann, my girl, studied gastronomy in New York and then in France, something unimaginable for the daughter of a seamstress from the countryside in the 1960s. Today, she is an internationally recognized chef with 2 restaurants of her own. Peter, the youngest, became an architect, responsible for all the beautiful expansions and renovations of our spaces over the years. And Theodore? He continued working for me for almost a decade, not because of my revenge, although at first it was that, but because he had nowhere to go. With time, anger gave way to a kind of pity. He was a defeated man, destroyed not so much by me, but by his own choices. In 1978, 10 years after the scandal, he fell seriously ill. Liver cancer, a consequence of years of drinking. I allowed him to continue living in the small room at the back of the property. The townspeople thought I was a saint for taking care of the man who had betrayed me so cruelly. "Magdalene has a heart of gold," they would say. Little did they know that each gesture of apparent kindness was, at the beginning, a reminder to Theodore, I won, you lost. But something curious happens when you get older. Grudges lose their strength. The desire for revenge dissipates. In the last months of Theodore's life, I found myself genuinely concerned about his well-being. I hired a nurse, ensuring he had the best care. Our children visited him, although the relationship was never fully repaired. Some breaks are permanent. On the night he died, in January 1979, I was by his side. I held his hand and said, "I forgive you, Theodore, not for what you did to me, but for what you helped me become." It was the greatest truth I ever spoke. Without that terrible betrayal, without those 17 nuns, I would never have discovered my strength, my capacity, my worth. I would have continued being the submissive wife, a man's shadow, instead of the respected businesswoman I became. The funeral was simple, but dignified. The entire town attended, not so much out of respect for him, but out of respect for me and my children. In his will, which I myself helped write in his final days, there was a public apology that was read by the priest. I ask forgiveness from Magdalene and my children for the suffering I caused. I hope they remember me not for my mistakes, but for the good that might have existed in me. I cried that day, not from sadness or anger, but for everything that could have been and wasn't. For that charming young man I fell in love with at 17, who got lost somewhere along the way. My second marriage was completely different. Robert was a widower, had 2 already teenage children when we met. It was a mature love, built on solid foundations of mutual respect and admiration. He saw me as a partner, not as a servant or ornament. He respected my independence, my business, my opinions. For 15 years we lived a full and happy life. We traveled, expanded the business, saw our children get married, our first grandchildren be born. When he died of a heart attack in 1994, I felt a different pain from that caused by Theodore. It wasn't the searing pain of betrayal, but the deep pain of the true loss of a companion. After Robert's death, at 51 years old, I could have retired. Financially, I was more than comfortable, but work had always been my passion, my therapy. I continued at the head of the business, although gradually passing more responsibilities to my children. And Benedict, the former Sister Benedict? Our relationship evolved in a surprising way. After the birth of her daughter, whom she named Clara in honor of the religious order she had left, she became my right hand in business. She had a natural talent for organization and public relations. Over time, we developed an unlikely friendship, united by a painful past and a shared desire for redemption. Clara grew up knowing that Theodore was her biological father and that my children were her half-siblings. It was a strange situation at first, but the children, with that innate acceptance that adults often lose, handled it better than we did. Today, Clara manages the institute I founded, training new generations of women. One of the greatest joys of my later years was starting a special project at the institute, a scholarship program for ex-nuns who had left religious life and needed to start over. Every Thursday, yes, the same day as Theodore's old parties, we hold charity dinners to raise funds for this program. It's my way of closing the circle, of transforming that sordid story into something beautiful and useful. Today, at 81 years old, I am the grandmother of 8 grandchildren, all college graduates, something I didn't even dream of for my own children when I was young. I am a great-grandmother to 3 adorable children who call me Grandma Maggie and have no idea of the battles I fought, so they could be born in a world where an abandoned woman is not cast away. My empire, because yes, it is an empire, includes the original catering service, now a luxurious event center, the Professional Training Institute, the Inn, a line of gourmet products with the St. Magdalene brand, and even a small winery that my son Peter started 10 years ago. Ironic, isn't it? The wine that was once served at clandestine parties in the convent now carries our award-winning label. The town has changed a lot since 1968. What was a small rural community has become a regional center with shopping malls, a university, industries. St. Joseph's Convent still exists, although with far fewer nuns and a more discreet profile. Occasionally, I provide services for charity events held there. Another irony of fate. People often ask me what the secret of my success is. They answer for me. Was it determination? Was it business vision? Was it hard work? All that is true, but the real secret that I rarely reveal is much simpler. It was pain transformed into purpose. That terrible night in 1968, when I dressed as a nun and discovered my husband at a party with 17 religious women, could have destroyed me in many ways. It did. It destroyed the naive woman I was, the submissive wife, the Catholic who accepted everything without questioning. But from the ashes of that destruction, another Magdalene emerged, stronger, wiser, more in control of herself. Younger people have difficulty understanding what life was like for a woman in the 1960s, especially in rural America. We were raised to serve, to accept, to sacrifice. Divorce was shameful. Working outside the home was frowned upon. Financial independence was practically impossible. When a woman was abandoned or betrayed, it was she who carried the mark of shame, as if she had failed to hold on to her man. My story has become almost a legend in the region. It's told in different versions, some more exaggerated than others. I've heard that there were 30 nuns, not 17. I've heard that Theodore sold the nuns to other men, which was never true. I've heard that I burned down the convent for revenge, another absurd invention. The truth is much simpler and much more powerful. A betrayed woman who, instead of despairing, used the betrayal as a springboard for her independence. A woman who transformed tears into work sweat, who converted humiliation into determination, who rewrote her destiny with her own hands. I know that many women watching me now may be going through difficult situations, betrayals, abandonments, financial difficulties. My message to you is, don't let pain define you, but transform you. Use it as fuel, not as an anchor. The man who tried to destroy me ended up being, unwittingly, the architect of my liberation. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the porch of my house, watching the sunset over the gardens of the St. Magdalene Institute, I think of that 26-year-old trembling with anger inside a borrowed nun's habit. I wish I could go back in time and tell her, "Stay calm, girl. This pain will pass, and on the other side of it awaits a life you can't even imagine." The greatest lesson I've learned in these 81 years is that our greatest weaknesses can become our greatest strengths, and our worst moments can be the beginning of our best days. That perfumed note I found in Theodore's pocket wasn't the end of my story. It was just the end of the first chapter. And now, my dears, if you liked this true story of triumph, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share with someone who needs to hear that yes, it is possible to start over. It's possible to transform betrayal into triumph. It's possible to be defeated in a battle and still win the war. This is Magdalene Fields, 81 years old, ex-wife of a man who cheated with 17 nuns, current owner of the largest event complex in the region, mother of 3, grandmother of 8, great-grandmother of 3, and a woman who learned that the greatest revenge is not destroying who hurt us, but flourishing despite the wound. God writes straight with crooked lines, as the saying goes, and sometimes the most crooked lines lead to the most beautiful destinations. If it weren't for that terrible night dressed as a nun, I would never have become the strong woman I am today. Your story doesn't end in difficult moments either. That's precisely where it begins.